The Russia-Ukraine war, which began in February 2022, has continued to shape global politics, economics, and security. Initially perceived as a regional conflict, its aftermath has escalated into a crisis with worldwide implications. While Ukraine fights for sovereignty and Russia pursues its strategic ambitions, the ripple effects are reshaping America's foreign policy. The United States, once firm in its military and financial support for Ukraine, is now under growing pressure to advocate for peace talks. But what exactly has forced Washington to reconsider its stance and push for diplomacy between Moscow and Kyiv? 1. Economic fallout and energy shock. One of the most visible consequences of the war has been the disruption of global energy markets. Europe, heavily dependent on Russian oil and gas, faced an unprecedented energy crisis. While the U.S. initially benefited by exporting liquefied natural gas (LNG) to Europe, the global spike in fuel prices triggered inflation at home. American households faced rising costs of living from gasoline to food prices, sparking political debates and domestic frustration. This economic pressure has forced U.S. policymakers to acknowledge that prolonging the war is unsustainable without addressing the financial burden it places on ordinary Americans. A prolonged conflict threatens global stability, making peace talks not just a diplomatic necessity, but an economic survival strategy. 2. Strain on U.S. military and defense resources. America has poured billions of dollars into Ukraine's defense, supplying advanced weaponry, ammunition, and intelligence. However, this extensive military aid has strained U.S. stockpiles and defense budgets. Military experts warn that the U.S. risks depleting its readiness to respond to potential threats in Asia, particularly in the South China Sea where tensions with China are rising. The Pentagon faces a critical dilemma. How long can America sustain Ukraine's war effort without jeopardizing its global security commitments? This question has accelerated Washington's interest in peace negotiations as a way to balance its military priorities. 3. Geopolitical risks of escalation. Perhaps the greatest danger is the risk of escalation. Russia has repeatedly warned against deeper NATO involvement, and any miscalculation could spark direct confrontation between the world's two largest nuclear powers. The use of hypersonic missiles, drone warfare, and threats of nuclear readiness has heightened global fears. For America, the nightmare scenario is being dragged into a direct conflict with Russia, which could devastate global stability. By encouraging peace talks, Washington seeks to reduce the chances of accidental escalation and maintain control over an increasingly unpredictable situation. 4. Shifting global alliances. The war has also reconfigured global alliances in ways that challenge U.S. dominance. Russia has strengthened ties with China, Iran, and North Korea, forming what some analysts call a counter-Western bloc. These partnerships have expanded energy trade, military cooperation, and political coordination against Western sanctions. Meanwhile, countries in Africa, Asia, and Latin America have resisted Western pressure to isolate Russia, preferring neutral or balanced stances. This shifting geopolitical landscape underscores the limits of U.S. influence. For America, pushing peace talks could be a way to reassert leadership on the global stage while preventing rivals from capitalizing on prolonged conflict. 5. Political divisions at home. Domestically, the war has become a divisive issue in American politics. While some leaders call for continued military support to Ukraine, others argue that U.S. taxpayers should not carry the burden of a foreign war indefinitely. The debate is increasingly shaping electoral campaigns, with candidates using the issue to appeal to voters frustrated by inflation and domestic crises. This political reality is forcing Washington to rethink its approach. A visible push for diplomacy allows American leaders to demonstrate responsibility, show concern for taxpayers, and address growing skepticism about endless foreign engagements. 6. Humanitarian catastrophe. Beyond politics and economics, the humanitarian cost of the war is staggering. Millions of Ukrainians have been displaced, thousands of civilians have lost their lives, and entire cities have been reduced to rubble. Images of suffering have shocked global audiences, raising moral and ethical questions about the continuation of war. For America, supporting peace talks is not just a strategic move but also a humanitarian imperative. The U.S. can position itself as a global leader for peace, demonstrating that it values diplomacy and human lives over endless warfare. 7. America's dilemma, supporting Ukraine versus seeking peace. The U.S. faces a delicate balance. On one hand, it wants to stand by Ukraine, a democratic ally resisting aggression. On the other hand, it must acknowledge the dangerous aftermath of an indefinite war. Prolonging conflict risks economic instability, military overstretch, and even global escalation. Thus, Washington's recent push for peace talks is not a sign of weakness but a pragmatic recognition of global realities. The dangerous aftermath of the war has forced America to prioritize stability, prevent escalation, and protect its national interests. Conclusion. The Russia-Ukraine war has exposed the fragility of global peace and the interconnectedness of modern geopolitics. While Ukraine's fight for survival continues, America's growing push for peace talks reflects the broader consequences of this conflict. From economic strain to nuclear risks, from political divisions to humanitarian crises, the war's aftermath has created a dangerous reality that no major power can ignore. As the world watches, the question remains: will diplomacy triumph or will the cycle of conflict continue? America's role in this process could determine not only the fate of Ukraine and Russia but also the future of global stability.